please welcome Kayce Singletary and Alexis Stratton.
Hi, my name is Alexis Stratton.
And I'm Kayce Singletary, and we're educators at Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands, the local rape crisis center that serves Lexington, Richland, Newberry, and Sumter counties.
I want to start today by telling you a brief story about Taekwondo. I've practiced Taekwondo for years. The co-ed classes I take are about half made up of women, adult women. And there are also kids who practice at my academy, and many of them are girls. Most of the time, we do the same exercises and activities, and the only qualifications that usually give us different tasks or things to do are age and belt level. Otherwise, we all spar together, do circuit training together, and do our forms together, regardless of gender. So there was this one time I was assisting at a black belt test, and some of these women were also testing for their temporary or first-degree black belts. Now, if you don't know, that's kind of a big deal. It was the end of a 4+ hour test and a milestone after years of training, many, many more hours than that. And something strange happened. While one of the guest instructors was giving feedback to one of the boys who had tested, he said, "You punch like a girl. You need to learn to punch from your rib cage and not from your chest. This is how girls do it, and it's a weaker way to punch." I looked around me at the other female black belts up there, at the girls and women who just completed the exact same test as all the guys up there, the same test that I'd passed a few months before, and I did a double take. You punch like a girl, I thought. What? All around me were these powerful women who could throw some of the hardest punches and kicks I'd ever seen, who'd just broken cement bricks with their bare hands and feet, and who could do 360 roundhouse kicks that would blow your mind. And still, a boy is told, "You punch like a girl." We often hear things like this, right? You punch like a girl, you throw like a girl. It's all of the same family. Sometimes it's used as an insult, sometimes as an explanation, but what do these comments really mean? Well, to the boy receiving these words, it means you are weak, less than, bad, or the way you're doing it is wrong. Because in terms of sports and physical force, to punch or throw like a man means to do it the right way. In terms of our culture, to be like a man means to be strong, athletic, dominant, and so on. And it's something that's supposed to come naturally to men, according to our culture. But what about the girl overhearing these words? What kind of message is she getting about what it means to be a girl or a woman? Well, first of all, that I, as a girl or a woman, am weak, less than, bad. And that in order to be a good athlete, I need to be like a man. That as a woman, I'm not enough. In other words, what ends up happening is both on the field or on the mat or off, these kinds of words end up creating a culture in which women are valued less than men, are considered needing to be protected, and considered weak. While on the flip side, we end up creating this masculine stereotype that has to be upheld at all costs, particularly against the dangers of effeminizing. Because, as we all know, there's nothing worse than throwing, crying, or being like a girl.
Now, this is only a simple example of how this can occur, but the language that surrounds us sets up power differences and hierarchies, which are part of what allow gender-based violence to happen. Men are expected to stay in the man box, which is full of stereotypes about how society expects them to behave. In other words, men are expected to be aggressive, dominant, violent, unemotional. On the other hand, women are expected to stay in the woman box, which says that they're supposed to be caregivers, passive, submissive, and emotional.
And if either is outside of that box,
there's a lot of name-calling and regulation that occurs, which can sometimes lead to extreme behaviors. So men might become more aggressive or violent. And on the other hand, women may intentionally act more passive or submissive. So when two people in a relationship buy into these stereotypes, it can also lead to violence within those relationships. Now, this might seem like a big jump. Okay, from words to violence. You might be thinking, these are just figures of speech. I don't know why you're making such a big deal over nothing. Or, I hear this kind of stuff all the time, but it doesn't affect me or how I see myself.
Kind of like sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me.
Right, but words do hurt, and they have the power to contribute to or stand up against a culture of violence.
And not only does this kind of gendered language contribute to a culture of violence, language itself does violence to people of all genders, the violence of misrecognition and erasure.
So if a girl hears you throw like a girl, she may equate that to girl equals bad, therefore I'm bad. But what if a girl doesn't punch or throw like a girl? What does that make her? If she doesn't fit into the woman box, is she woman enough?
Or when someone uses words that describe genitalia as an insult, what does that make people who have that genitalia?
Or if they insult someone using the terms queer or gay, what about people who identify with those labels?
And what if a boy isn't violent, dominant, or aggressive? What if he doesn't fit into that man box? Does that make him not a man? Can he do or perform his gender as he pleases, or is he an impossibility?
Perhaps we'd like to think that we can choose to ignore the words that come our way, that words are just words, and we're the ones that have the power to give them weight.
But words matter, and words have power, whether we want to admit it or not. They're sticky. Meaning sticks to them. Sarah Ahmed writes about this concept in her book, The Cultural Politics of Emotion. The emotions associated with words do not simply reside in those words themselves, but the emotions move sideways through sticky associations between words and signs, and also forwards and backwards with past associations. Thus, over time, emotion accumulates with those words and signs, both individually and culturally. So when someone says something to me, I'm not just hearing what they're saying, but I'm also making associations with past memories that I have, as well as with contemporary uses of the words and signs, which may or may not be related.
So again, if someone says you throw like a girl, you may be thinking of the time someone said it to you in 3rd grade, either subconsciously or consciously. Or you may be thinking of the general devaluation of women in society, linked to words or phrases that make girls and women seem subpar to men, thus creating an effective reaction beyond the meaning of the words themselves.
Or if someone makes a rape joke, I might think about my experiences working at sexual trauma services at the Midlands, other survivors of sexual assault that I know, my own experiences with sexual violence, the linguistic history of the word rape, other rape jokes, rape versus rape, as Whoopi Goldberg once tried to distinguish.
So it's not the word or the sign itself that gives these things meaning, but it's the histories and emotions that are associated with it. And when these connotations are used to enact oppression or to reinforce traditional gender roles or stereotypes, they can become even more significant. Feelings stick to words, and the words stick to us, and they shape us and our perceptions. So Alexis and I work as prevention educators at Sexual Trauma Services, and in this work we see firsthand the way that these sticky words can both enact violence and allow violence to occur. For example, the perceived severity of a sexual assault can be impacted based on the language used to describe that assault. So in 2004, Theodore McDonald and Linda Klein did a study involving 300 college students, 150 men, 150 women. In the study, participants were given passages of similar length, and they varied only in their description of a crime, the crime being date rape. So in the first passage, active language was used. Elizabeth was kissed and had sexual intercourse after she told her date no. Let me say that again. Elizabeth's date kissed and had sexual intercourse with her all after she told him to stop. In the second passage, passive language was used. So Elizabeth was subjected to kissing and unwanted sexual intercourse. Now in the third passage, language that diffuses responsibility was used. There wasn't a clear perpetrator and victim identified. So in that example, Elizabeth and Charles became involved in kissing and sexual intercourse after Elizabeth told Charles to stop. Now what McDonald and Klein found was that language that diffuses responsibility reinforced the rape myth that women who were assaulted by their dates may have actually wanted sex, and it significantly impacted the perceived severity of that crime, even though in every example the crime was the same. Additionally, they found that this type of language implicitly conveys that committing date rapes are less than objectionable and may actually increase tolerances for the crime of date rape. Furthermore, they found that rape-tolerant attitudes in college men have been linked to aggressive sexual behavior. And when women read media reports that diffuse responsibility, they're less likely to come forward and report crimes of date rape when they're victimized. So what this means to me is that language matters. The words we use shape how we perceive ourselves and how we see each other. They reflect our beliefs, and our beliefs end up influencing our actions. By acknowledging this power and changing the words that we use, we can begin to change the culture around us.
So sure, sticks and stones may break my bones, but this kind of gendered language ends up contributing to what we call rape culture. You throw like a girl is rape culture.
Objectifying women is rape culture.
Rape jokes are rape culture.
Rape culture is the culture that condones and surrounds us, that expects sexual violence and gender-based violence to happen. And it's done through media representation, strict gender norms and stereotypes, and through the language that we use. It's the culture that says that male aggression is both expected, acceptable, and inevitable.
Boys will be boys.
Masculinity is linked to violence.
And it's the culture that tells us that we need to blame victims for the sexual violence that is done to them.
Or says that a woman cries rape because she doesn't want to look like a slut.
Because you know she wanted it, even if she was a good girl. So this is discouraging, right? And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, but that's culture. How do I change a whole culture? I don't know what to do. Well, believe it or not, we're not here to discourage you. In fact, we're here to inspire you.
Because we believe that individuals and communities can make a difference, and that change begins with me.
And you, all the way up there in the back. I know you're hiding, right? So you might be wondering, how do we do that? We learned that through small steps, we can begin to change the culture that tells us it's her fault, that boys don't cry, and that rape is a punchline. So the first thing you can do is watch your words. Remember that words are sticky. They have a history and a context and connotations. And when you use those words, you use all the history that goes along with them. So be aware of your own biases and blind spots. Recognize when you call grown women girls and grown men men. Recognize when you use a gendered name as an insult, and recognize the damage that can do.
So in public health, we have a variety of theories and models that we use to describe and explain individual behavior change. The theory of reasoned action is one of those theories, and it suggests that the attitudes toward a particular behavior reflect the attitudes towards the result of the behavior, and that individual behavior change requires 3 elements. 1, the person's belief about the behavior. 2, the person's belief about what significant others think they should do. And then 3, how important those significant others actually are to the person. So we see this theory at work in marketing and media campaigns every day. Those subjective norms that say, what our friends, family, bosses, idolized celebrities say, think, and do, all of these things influence our beliefs and our actions. Now, the problem is we tend to have a flawed perspective of what other people think about behavior, and we tend to think that social norms or social norms are more conservative than we tend to think them to be. So if someone tells a sexist joke or uses degrading language and we're bothered by it, we might feel like we're outside of the norm. Everyone else seems to be laughing, so why should I be the one to say anything? But actually, more people are probably bothered by it than we think. In the article, The Reality of Linguistic Violence Against Women, William Gay states that sexist language is a symptom of deeper cultural violence. And by eliminating that language alone, we're not going to end violence against women. Nevertheless, he states that by acknowledging the acknowledging the connection between language and consciousness, we can start to see that by changing our words, it can lead to not only changed thought, but changed action. Cultural change is not going to happen without the action of individuals, even if one individual cannot be responsible for changing an entire culture. What we can do, though, is think of our own attitudes towards sexist, degrading, violent, and gendered language. And we can start to have conversations with those closest to us about how we feel and how they feel when that type of language is used. We can agree to hold each other accountable. We can back up others when they take a stand. And we can understand that by watching our language and doing all of this, we can actually begin to change the culture.
So it's also not just about watching your words, but also fighting back by reclaiming words and phrases, by resignifying things that were once used in a hateful or derogatory manner, like the word queer, and changing them into something new and something powerful. So we want to challenge you to make a new narrative that resists stereotypes and rewrites rape culture.
But to do that, we first have to be aware of the hateful and oppressive language that makes up part of rape culture. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and just make a mental list of the things that you do to protect yourself against rape.
Do you wear certain clothes or not wear certain clothes? Do you not go out at certain times of night? Those kinds of things.
So maybe you've seen some of these things before, and maybe these are the things that you thought of. Having a certain hairstyle, not going out at a certain time of night, or not venturing into certain areas. That all of these things will reduce your risk of becoming a victim of sexual assault. Most college campuses even offer safety lessons, particularly to female students, on how to not get raped.
But what we know is that these are all, in fact, myths. And usually a survivor of sexual assault is often usually assaulted by someone that they know. And it doesn't matter what kind of hairstyle you have or what time of day it is. And while risk reduction has its place, the problem with telling women not to go out at night or to watch their drinks is that it puts the burden of responsibility of preventing rape on the potential victim instead of where it belongs, which is on the rapist.
So with all of this in mind, what we need to do is to begin to change that narrative. We're aware of all of these messages that are bombarding us every day, and so we start to create a shift. We can create a new lens through which to see all of these things. And so we can do that by, well, you may remember the recent Twitter hashtag, Safety Tips for Ladies. And so it was created as a parody by Hillary Bowman Smart. She was from Melbourne. And so what this does is highlights the absurdity of all of those victim-blaming safety tips that we just talked about. So people all over the world contributed to this. They helped debunk these myths, and they turned all of these messages on their heads. And so now we can all see how absurd those certain... Yeah, that's my favorite one, too. And the T-Rex arms I enjoy. So we can see how all of these things are just absolutely absurd. And so everyone contributed to that collective consciousness.
One more. Oh, no, go back. My favorite. My favorite. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So these are some ways that we might be able to upset rape culture, but there's actually another organization that is working to do just the same thing, and it's called Force, Upsetting Rape Culture. And this is an artist-activist collaboration started by Hannah Brancato and Rebecca Nagel. And what they and their supporters do is they do these art actions that work to upset the culture of rape and promote a culture of consent. Most recently, some of their actions have been kind of covert. So they did the Pink Loves Consent campaign, in which they created a website that appeared to be from Victoria's Secret. And on that website, they featured a new line of consent-loving underwear. And if you can see, one says no peeking, which is then, and now is no means no. And so what they did is they created this website, and it made a big buzz on social media, both before and after everyone realized it was a hoax. Which leads to the question, what kind of messaging is Victoria's Secret giving us, and why were people so shocked and also grateful that Victoria's Secret would actually acknowledge the importance of consent?
Okay, so we've seen a few examples where we're like turning the message on its head. We're rewriting that narrative. But sometimes we need to tell our own stories in an attempt to change the culture. Project Unbreakable is an act of resistance started by Grace Brown, and it's a really simple concept. Survivors of sexual violence take a quote from their assailant, and they take a photo holding that quote. And the result is both heart-wrenching and empowering. Survivors are using the words that were said to them, the things used to disempower them, and sadly, the things that perpetrators in our culture tell survivors day after day. And they're telling their own story. They're making these words a testament to their own experiences, and they're refusing to let these words bury them in silence.
Force has also recently moved towards telling survivor stories through what they call the Monument Project. Through the Monument Project, they want to create a national monument to survivors of sexual assault and abuse. But until they can do that, they've started making the Monument Quilt, which is stitching together thousands of stories by survivors of sexual assault and abuse and displaying it around the country, eventually, hopefully, at the National Mall. Through doing this, they hope to create a public space to heal and also to change how Americans respond to rape. So they're telling stories, reclaiming stories, and creating a new narrative in which survivors don't have to be ashamed, no longer feel alone, and feel like they're free to speak up and break the silence. And they're doing it in a very public way.
Now, these may seem like big undertakings, but even locally, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands has begun to shape the culture through our Imagine If project.
The Imagine If project is an arts and anti-violence initiative where we're asking community members to imagine a world without violence and show us what that might look like. To do so, we're doing arts workshops and inviting individual submissions from people. And then we're going to take those submissions and we're going to show them in downtown Columbia at TAPS Art Center during April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So through this, we hope to empower people to tell their own stories. And we also hope that they will help us see how we might be able to change the world.
But remember, we're not asking you to create a viral meme or make a quilt that will cover the National Mall. We're asking you to start with the small daily changes that can happen in your life by watching your words and by speaking up for others. It's not always the biggest things that make the biggest difference. Change starts small, and it starts with you.
We believe that sexual violence is not inevitable. It's preventable.
And to prevent violence, we have to change the culture.
To change the culture, we have to believe in the possibility of changing the culture.
We believe in that possibility, and we hope you'll join us in imagining a world without violence.
And we hope you'll join us in making it happen. Thank you.